Hello, everyone. So welcome to today's session. It is a pleasure to be here on another workshop organized by Mentari. And I'm here today, and my main goal today, as I'm here, is to share with you some of the perspectives and some of the things that I've learned about teaching writing. Because in reality, when it comes to teaching English, one of the things that people usually complain or teachers complain is that, well, I don't have too much time to teach writing, or it's a little difficult to teach writing to my students. So today, my goal is that we can engage in a discussion and in exchanging some ideas about how to teach writing, especially how to teach transitions. So remember, this workshop would be nothing without your participation, without your presence, and without your collaboration. Okay, so I would just want to make this clear before we begin, just so that you know that your participation in your voluntary opinions will be crucial to the success of the workshop. Okay, so don't forget that. So let's get started. I'm going to do a quick introduction about the workshop itself. But before, let me start by giving you some background on myself so that you can understand. So I happen to be in Brazil now because I am a Brazilian American. I actually live in the United States, but because of this pandemic, I've been able to work remotely for a few months from Brazil. I've been here for 2 months already. And before coming here, I was actually in Indonesia. I was in Bali for a few months. So I've been working mostly as a linguist and as an educator. In my relevant work experience that probably matters to this workshop, I've worked in the US as a bilingual teacher in public education, public schools, and a writing specialist. I spent 5 years in Indonesia also working as an English language fellow and teacher and coordinator. And I actually saw from the list, there's a few of my former colleagues and former teachers that I've worked with in Indonesia. I recognize your names and I know that you're here in the session. So it's good to see that you're there. And I've also, my most recent position was in China, where I was working as an in English language assessment or as an English language assessment consultant. And now I'm working in Brazil. Also, I've been working for the past 3 weeks as an English language specialist on a curriculum project with a nonprofit organization. And I'll be doing this for probably another 3 or 4 months before I head back to the United States. And so I'm not going to talk much about this. This is just for you to know that today we're going to be interacting through Zoom. So make sure that to use your chat box if you have any questions. Ocha will be helping us gather those questions and put them out so that we can all share or engage with it or with them. Remember, whenever I ask for your opinion, please feel free to participate, but don't forget to unmute your microphone. And when you are listening to somebody else, just keep it mute, just in case. And we're also going to be using quizzes as a platform today to do some practice. So if you want to open another window to the side and just leave the joinmyquiz.com window open, this will make it easier for you later when you have to practice. But I will display this link again later on, just in case you forget to do it now. So moving on, let's get to the objectives of this session. So our main objectives are to reflect on strategies and tools to teach writing. This is one of the main goals that we have today. And the other objective that we have is to explore and experience how to teach transitions online, because of course we couldn't cover everything about teaching writing in one workshop, but we're going to cover one aspect of teaching writing, which is teaching transitions or how to use transitions, because this is crucial to good writing. So I'm going to do a very brief presentation because the best way to teach or to talk about teaching writing is by practicing. So we're going to be doing some practices, and there's some simple lessons or exercises that you can use, or formats for lessons that we're going to talk about when it comes to teaching transitions. Before we proceed, I would like to hear from you a little bit before we continue. Okay? There's a little poll that I'm going to put out, and I just want to use this poll as a way for me to know where you're coming from. And you can see it on screen right now. So if you could spend some time answering those questions. It's important for me to know where you're coming from, so that if I have to give an example, if I have to talk about something in particular during my workshop, then I know what to emphasize because I know what my audience is interested in. So as you can see here, the first question is, what is the main subject you teach? Right, so pick one of the areas of study here, or one of the subjects that you're teaching. Question number 2 is, what grade level do you teach? Right, and this is a multiple choice question as well. You can pick more than one. Number 3, how do you feel about teaching writing? Right, and it's be honest, okay, because it's important for me to know if you like teaching it, if you don't mind teaching it, etc. And number 4, teaching writing online is it easier than teaching it face-to-face, almost the same as, not as easy as, or much harder than teaching it face-to-face? So let's see your opinions. And we have, wow, about 50%, more than 50% of participants have voted. Well, you guys are a very dynamic group. I'm happy about that. So that means we're going to go over our stuff with high levels of participation. That's awesome. Great. So I'll give you another 30 seconds, okay, so that we can have more people putting in their votes. And maybe when we get closer to 80% or a little bit above 80%, we can go. All right. Well, you're going fast, so we still have a few more seconds to go before the 30 seconds expire. There you go. So I'm going to start covering some of the answers, especially some of the ones that are obvious as people continue to vote. So what is the main subject that you're teaching? Most of us here are teaching English or academic English, or some type of let me share or some type of English-related subject. But we have a few of us here teaching humanities, mathematics, science. Great. So if you're doing any type of bilingual teaching, this will also be useful to you. That's great. I particularly teach English, but when I was a teacher in California, I taught science, I taught math to a bilingual audience as well. So I had to teach some of these things in English, and some of it was writing in English when I was teaching other subjects. So we have SMP and SMA as the two main strands here, junior high school or senior high school, but a few university lectures also, and a few adults. So my experience, actually, yeah, I've in California, I used to work as an elementary school teacher. I taught grade 5. In Indonesia, I taught grade 5, 6, junior high, senior high, but most of my teaching was at university. And I've taught adults, and I still teach adults. And I'm mostly involved with professional development now. And but we have the majority of us teaching other. That's interesting here. And number 3, I think I like teaching it. That's good. Okay, I don't mind teaching it. So we have 7% of the people only like teaching it, only teach it when they have to. So I'm assuming you don't like it too much, but that's okay. At least you face the challenge. That's great. And not as easy as teaching it face-to-face. Yeah, I would say most educators would agree with that, even though today there are quite a few ways to teach writing effectively. Okay, and if you include a lot of collaboration in your teaching of writing or teaching of transitions, this can become a lot easier for us and for you as a teacher. Let's move on. And remember, as I keep on going, I will be asking for your participation. I'll be asking for you to illustrate some of the ideas that we're going to cover in this presentation. Okay. So what do we know from our experience and from some of the research about teaching writing today? Just to get us started. Teaching writing is a process, okay? And teaching writing is not something you can do in a week, you can do in a month. It's a process that goes on through your teaching. And you always have to keep on bringing it up and adding to the repertoire or the toolbox that your students have. So don't think that you're going to dedicate a few weeks of your year to teach writing, and that's okay. It is not okay. You have to teach it nonstop. Basically, every time you introduce a new structure, you introduce something new, or new content, you probably have to go back to writing a little bit. That's why writing, or the teaching of writing, is only effective when it is paced. What is paced? You break it down into smaller chunks, smaller pieces, and you go on through each piece one at a time. So you pace it out so that you don't teach it all of a sudden. It's one of those skills that takes a little time to develop. And so, because it requires extensive practice, right? Writing is a practical skill. When I'm teaching writing to my students, one of the things that I emphasize to them is that writing is like riding a bike, is like cooking, or maybe it's like playing a sport. The more you do it, the better you do it. And that's obviously true for everything. But writing does require quite a bit of practice when compared to other skills, especially other receptive skills like listening and reading. Writing will require more practice. Writing can and should involve peer feedback because it is a productive skill. You only know if you've been effective or not when you show it to other people, right? Speaking is only effective if people understand you, and writing is only effective if your readers understand you. So if you don't include feedback in the process, it's very difficult for you to know if your writing is meeting the goal or your goal as a writer, because you only match your goal if what you wrote is something that makes sense to somebody else, to your readers. So include readers in your writing process. That's very important, a step for teachers. And I'm trying to click on the slide here. I can't move on. I can't move my slide. Let me see if I can. Okay, so it looks like my screen and my slides froze. So let me try to get out of them and I will continue here. I don't see my, can you still hear me? Ocha, can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
We can still hear
So,
you, Fabio.
So my screen is completely frozen now. I don't know why it's happening. Can someone unfreeze my screen or stop my presentation?
Yeah.
So that I can try to get back on. I have no control over it. My mouse cursor disappeared. Okay, it appeared again. So let me share again. So as I was saying, it relies a lot on peer feedback for it to be successful. And you should always use or involve online tools. To be very honest with you, for the past decade, I've always taught writing using tools like Google Docs. I find it virtually a lot lengthier a process, or a lot more difficult a process for me to teach writing with all these online tools. So the fact that we're teaching writing fully online now, it's not really a bad thing. It's actually a good thing because it exposes educators to the tools that are available today when teaching writing. And quizzes are also one of them. And of course, teaching writing is not always easy, right? A lot of students don't like it and they think it's not really that important when it really is in a lot of ways. The other thing I would like to emphasize about writing before we continue is that because in relation to what I said about pacing and the process and the practice, remember that when you're teaching a whole type of text, remember that the process of writing goes from pre-writing to writing to revising to editing and then publishing. Publishing means making it public to other people, in this case. You may not put it on a journal or online, but you will show it to others. That's what publishing means here. But don't forget to leave enough time for all these processes, right? Pre-writing is a process of activating prior knowledge, organizing ideas, and this is very, very important for writing. And today, I want to call your attention before we begin to those levels, okay? When we teach writing, we're always teaching a genre, right? A lot of us here are English teachers. Most of us here are English teachers, and some are teaching science and other subjects. We understand there are math. So depending on the subject that you're teaching, or depending on the English class that you're teaching, you may be teaching a different genre, a different style of writing. So I may be teaching a narrative, I may be teaching a description, or maybe teaching a lab report if I'm teaching science. So those are the different genres. So the genre will determine the type of text that I'm teaching, right? So what are they writing? What are my students writing for? Are they writing to narrate something, to describe something, to convey their opinions? Or are they writing a report after a science experiment, or how they solved a math equation, for example? Because depending on this, the writing the focus of the writing will change based on the words they're using, the sentences they're using, and the paragraphs that they're using. Okay, and that's when we're teaching transitions. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about how cohesive, how this text is glued together, right? Does it make sense? Do the ideas make sense? Is there logic, right? And is there a mix of simplicity and complexity in the text? And remember, by saying that something is complex, we're not saying that it is difficult, right? Sometimes complexity in writing has to do with the writer making ideas more easily understandable to readers because of the words and the connections that the writer uses. Okay, so this is basically what we are talking about. So we're going to be focusing on the word, sentence, paragraph, and the text level today through this workshop. This is what I wanted to emphasize with all of you. And if you've taught transitions before and you do a search online, those pictures illustrate some of what you find online. Okay, you see never-ending lists of transition words, and usually to make it easier for us, some content developers will put those long lists organized by ideas, or you can call them purposes also of using transition. So we have emphasis, addition, contrast, and order, or addition, emphasis, order, comparison. But the reality is there's just too many words. Okay, I don't recommend that you teach all of this at once. And as you're going to see today, I only picked a few of them and a few ideas, but just a few of them to use as an illustration. Okay, so before I get to that, before I get to this slide, this particular slide here, let me hear from you a little bit. Let me get some of you to maybe write down in the chat box or share with us what your experience teaching writing has been. And the question that I have for you is, when you're teaching writing, what do you spend most of your time teaching for the most part? So let's get some volunteers. If I have some volunteers to jump in, great. If I don't have any volunteers in the first 5 or 10 seconds, I'll just get a few people, not to put you on the spot, but just to hear your perspective. Would anybody like to share? Junita, would you like to share? I see your name here in the chat box.
Yeah, maybe
So
the participants can also unmute themselves, Mr. Fabio.
Yeah, and remember to unmute yourself if you're sharing. You can unmute yourself and speak, or you can just write it in the chat box and I'll call your name. So again, when you're teaching writing, what do you mostly spend time teaching? What do you focus on? So let me call on somebody else. So I see here,
Hi,
Subianto.
Fabio.
Oh, let's go. Junita is coming over. Let's go,
Yes,
Junita.
I'm sorry because
Okay.
I have this workshop while working as well. I hope you don't mind, but I try to focus on both.
When you say both, what do you mean?
Focus on both. I mean, with this webinar and a little bit of the work that I have here because it's still in the working hours.
That's no problem. So when you teach writing, Junita, what do you focus on usually? Like, what do you teach? What do you spend most of your time teaching your students?
In English, right? Because actually most of them are the spelling. The spelling, one of the most important thing, the spelling, and the words that they create, like the sentences and the relation between one. Sorry. Right. The relations between the first line, the second line, you know, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And
that's a very good point.
Yeah, focusing on the words that they choose, and then the actually the grammar as well, the structure. I teach.
So basically emphasizing the connections between your ideas, right?
Yes.
The connection
Yes.
between their ideas, actually. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anita.
You're welcome.
And let's hear from Sugianto. I see your, if you're called Sugianto, you can jump in. So maybe there's more than one. Would you like to share what you focus on when you're teaching writing usually?
Or maybe we can invite Mr. Ahmad Taufik because he is raising his hand.
Okay.
Okay. Hello,
Taufik,
Mr.
I
Ahmad
see you
Taufik.
there.
Okay, so for me, usually the main focus for teaching writing to my students is usually how to at first encourage them to write, because usually like they are not really confident, like they know what to write, but they are not having enough vocabularies in their brain. So I think like usually they will start writing when like they know the words that they are about to write. So in that, I am trying to focus on how students are actually having more vocabularies before writing.
That's it. That's it. Thank you, Taufik. It's good to see you here. I've worked with Taufik before. It's good to see you here. And thank you for your comment, because yes, you're right. Because if your students don't know what to write and don't have a lot of vocabulary, so you're going to have to supply them with the vocabulary that they need, or pre-teach that vocabulary first, or do some reading activities first to give them some vocabulary to use in the writing. That's a very good point. And I usually tell my students or even teachers that I work with that writing is the flip side of reading, right? If you don't read a lot, it's very hard for you to write successfully. Let's get one more volunteer. Would anybody else like to jump in?
Yeah,
and
we have
tell
Mr.
us?
Ronnie Tandeo here.
Okay, thank you, Ocha.
Hello, Mr. Ronnie.
Hello, Mr.
Hello.
Hello, is that right?
Yeah, good job on
Yeah,
pronouncing
hello,
it.
hello. So for me, based on my experience in teaching writing, I think the first, as we know that there are many aspects in writing, right? First, maybe the content of the writing, and then the organization, the unity, and also cohesion, and maybe some other aspects. When I teach writing, especially for academic writing, what I focus most in the first place is how they develop the ideas. So they really have to understand what the question is about, what the question asks, right? So after they have the ideas that they can develop in their writing, so what they have to do next is to organize the ideas so that the readers can follow the ideas smoothly. To make the ideas go smoothly in that piece of writing, they certainly have to make everything well connected. I think that's how transitions work. Okay, I think that's much. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for your contribution. And that's basically what we're going to emphasize here now. And I think based on what you all said, we can agree on one thing. Teaching writing is complex in itself, not because of its difficulty only, or maybe it's not even difficult, but there's many parts to it, right? Because connecting ideas and making sure that those ideas make sense to readers is not really something that is easy for us, or sometimes it may make sense to us, but when you give it to somebody else, it may not make as much sense to them. So that's why working on transitions and working on how you move from one idea to the other is really important in writing. And that's what we're trying to emphasize here. So there's 2 more slides before we go into our first practice, really, and first exercise in terms of using transitions. I just want to emphasize to you that when I teach writing, I always keep this in mind. I always thinking that, okay, before I get to complex writing, I need to start from simple, right? Because there's 3 levels of writing. There's you can have simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. Why is it important to know that? Because good writers will use a mix of these, right? And there's some discussions about, there's always a few more complex sentences, or there's compound and simple, but that really depends on the genre. It really, really depends. But remember that simple sentences are basically sentences that are by itself, right? You have a subject and a verb and sometimes a complement, and one sentence stops and another one continues. So I have a series of simple sentences here. And when you make them compound, you're usually using the fanboys coordinating conjunctions, we call them that. And they're usually connected with a comma, right? So you have a simple sentence, comma, a conjunction, in this case, and then another simple sentence, right? I saw a cat and he saw me too. And when you have complex sentences, then you're using subordinating conjunctions, since, when, although, which, and these include relative pronouns, conjunctions itself, referring to time, contrast, etc. And you also have transition words in addition to, however, despite. These are only a few of many, right? So you have, I saw a cat, when he saw me, he ran. Or the cat ran after he saw me. This shouldn't be a car, the cat, right? There's a spelling issue here. Why is this important? Because when you look at language levels, the CFR, or even IELTS scores, the amount of simple, compound, and complex structures that writers use may affect their score. Okay, so for example, it's impossible for you to get a 5 or a 6 in IELTS if you don't have enough evidence of complex structures, right? And because if you look at our own language development, even in our first language, kids first they start mastering simple sentences and then they go to compound sentences. It's very common for young children to start using and, but a lot. And then when they start developing more language, they start using subordinating conjunctions. And in school, they learn a lot more of these, right? So even language development follows, to some degree, not as much as second language learning, these steps, okay? And today, just to keep us focused, we're gonna be working on these ideas when it comes to using transitions, addition, contrast, time, and consequence, right? And we're gonna be using a mix of compound and complex transition words. Okay, so you have and then some other some other transition words that convey the same meaning of addition, the same idea, right? But, and a list of others that convey similar ideas. Then, and then a bunch of other complex transition words used for complex sentences. And then for consequence, so, which has to do with because, since, therefore, as a result, etc. Okay, any questions so far before we proceed? Again, you're going to see examples of this, but any questions about any of these before we move on? Let me give you a few seconds. If not, then we'll continue. Okay, so we'll continue. So how are we going to practice this today? So today, our practice will involve 3 steps. The first steps, and this is how I suggest you teach it to students. Make sure your students understand when you're teaching transition words, why we need them. Okay? And this is followed by our second step, which is help students learn how to identify the ideas connecting the sentences. Another way to talk about ideas is, what's the purpose of adding another sentence here? If you have another sentence and you're adding another sentence, if you have one sentence and you're adding another, why are you adding the second sentence? What's the purpose of this second sentence? What does it do? Does it add information? Does it include contrast information? Does it involve a time element, right? Or does it shift the focus to time? So what's happening? And the third step allows students, as they practice, to move from simple to complex writing so that they practice simple, compound sentences and complex sentences. So how does this work in practice? Okay, so why do we use transition words? How do we teach that? Well, I like to show students examples like these. Okay, so I have the sentences. Consider the sentences. 20 minutes passed. We were standing. We were at the bus stop. Right. So those are 3 simple sentences. And what we see here, the text is a little choppy like the chop, chop, chop. Right. Cut, cut, cut. 20 minutes passed. Cut. We were standing. Cut. We were at the bus stop. Cut. And because we're cutting too much, we're stopping too much, this causes some repetition or generates some repetition. We were, right? By using a transition word, I can eliminate this repetition and I can make the text less choppy. 20 minutes passed, and we were standing at the bus stop, right? So I connected 20 minutes past with we were using the transition, and I combined we were standing, we were at the bus stop with a sentence that just says we were standing at the bus stop. So I have here a text that flows and is less repetitive. So this is why we use transition words, to make ideas flow better and to reduce repetition. And sometimes repetition is good in writing, but too much repetition is not good. Another example, we waited, 20 minutes passed, we decided to leave. Again, the text is a little bit choppy again. It depends on the context, right? Because in some contexts, this text would be okay. But in other contexts, it would be a little choppy or too many pauses and also repetitive. But you can say, we waited for 20 minutes, but we decided to leave. Or you can even say, we waited 20 minutes, but decided to leave. You can even eliminate we if you want to. But it's just an option here, stylistic option. And so the text flows and is more synthetic. So using transition words helps increase flow, helps avoid repetition, and helps us make the text a little more synthetic. Okay, so these are the main reasons why we use transition words in writing. And it's good to be doing to do this kind of exercise with your students so that they can see before you go into subordinate clauses, before you go into more elaborate transition words. Make sure that students understand why transition words are needed, even when you're doing compound sentences like we're doing now. So I want to do a little bit of practice with you so you all have a chance to put that into practice. And the way that you're going to practice is by, first of all, I'd like you to go to joinmyquiz.com. And I'm going to share another screen with you now. We're going to join my quiz. And I'm going to play, as you are opening joinmyquiz.com, I'm going to play a little quiz for you to practice. Now, remember, we're not going to be, this is not a competition. We're not going to be, you can use any name you want when you practice. We're not going to be assigning or determining a winner here. Or this is just for you to practice. And I'm going to give you a few minutes so that you can try some questions that you could use to practice transition words with your students. And after we practice them, we're going to talk about why the questions were designed the way they are, or they have been designed, and how this could help us teach. Okay, so let me share this with you. And there you go. So this is the code that you should be using in Join My Quiz. So I'm going to write for a few of you to join.
Yeah,
To join
and
my
the
quiz.
link and the code is already on the chat box also, yeah?
Thank you, Ocha.
Yeah, we have some
All right.
participants here.
Yeah. Can we get started already? Let me wait maybe 5 more, actually 10 more seconds to make sure that we get people to be able to. And if you join after I start, it's okay. You're just going to be able to keep on working on the questions. Wow, that's a very dynamic group. I'm happy that people are joining quickly
So
and promptly.
active, yeah, Mr. Fabio.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, this is impressive. So I'm going, if you are still joining, do what you need to do to join, and I'm going to start the quiz so that people who have already joined can start their practice. All right, so let's go on. All right, wow, very dynamic group here.
How
Right, I
many
see
questions
here.
do we have here?
Ocha, did you say something?
Yeah. How many questions are there in the quiz?
So there's only 4 questions. I put only
Mhm.
4. So I'm keeping track here, and I'm sharing with you how many of us have answered the questions. I'm going to wait until maybe 40 people to finish the questions. And then as you keep on answering, we're going to continue discussing them. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we have around 40 people that have already answered. Please, if you haven't answered the questions, answer them, because that will get you the experience with the questions that we need to talk about them a little bit ahead. But I'm going to stop sharing this screen now as you keep on answering and continue with the slides. Because yeah, let's continue with the slides. So where do I want to get with this practice, or where do we want to get with this practice? What we're going to do now, I'm going to engage in a discussion with you about why these questions have been designed the way they have been designed, and how this matters to your teaching of writing. Why this matters to your teaching of writing. So when I organize this question, one of the ways to organize and to practice transitions is when you are making questions or practice questions, you organize them by content level and by language level. What do I mean by that? There's 9 types of questions that I can create if I think about those 2 levels, okay? And if I only focus on this type of content, okay? When it comes to content, and if I use Bloom's taxonomy, I have the lower levels of understanding, I have the mid levels of understanding, and the higher levels of understanding. And I want to make sure that my questions, they go from basic understanding to more complex understanding. So I have recall, questions that focus on recalling information. Recall is the same as remembering, right? Questions that focus on applying information, which is the application of information, and questions that focus on the analysis of information. From a language perspective, it's important too that I practice that some of my questions focus on vocabulary or on the word level. Some of my questions focus on the sentence level and on the text level. Why? Because my students will be all over the place. Some students will be able to analyze information, but they don't have enough English language to produce a long text. So it's important to start with those students at the word level, vocabulary level, and the sentence level. Some students will be able to write texts, okay, but they're not very good at analyzing information. So you're still going to be practicing more recall type questions and more application type questions. And if you think about those 2 dimensions when you are creating questions, you can create questions that go from simple to more complex to your students, and this will help you. Let me give you some examples here. Okay, look at this question. This is one of the questions that you used in your quiz, right? Complete the sentence. I did not finish the homework. It was too hard, right? And the question here, the answer here is because. Okay, so before I continue here, let me just show you the results of your quiz, right? Because this is going to be an important thing. Okay, let me end the quiz here. And here, okay, so I have here, so most of you got incorrect, actually got it correct, oh, sorry, got the first one correct, second one correct, even though this is not our focus, right? Multiple choice, and 52 of you answered let me go back here to the leaderboard and see here you have the points. Okay, so when it comes to this answer here, to the non-multiple choice question, trying to end this, but it's not ending. There you go. Let's see if quizzes is going to. Okay, so let me project the question because I think it's just a better idea to just project it here. Okay, so when it comes to the 4 questions that we answered, notice that the last question here requires that you write, and we're going to get to that, right? When I organize those questions, 1, 2, 3, and 4, there's a natural progression here in terms of what I'm assessing in when it comes to language and the cognitive level that I'm using here or that I'm focusing on here. So if I go back to the slides, I can illustrate that to you. Okay, so this question here complete the sentence. I did not finish the homework because it was too hard. Okay, in terms of language, I'm focusing on vocabulary. I'm practicing transitions at the word level. Why? Because they just have to fill in one word. I give them 3 words, they have to pick one. So my practice is focused on the vocabulary level. And that my students are applying. It's not just I'm not asking them to remember one word. Okay, I'm asking them to analyze the words and apply the one that makes sense in that particular sentence. Okay, so if I go back to my table there, okay, vocabulary level and apply, you will notice the vocabulary apply. This is a type 2 question, right? This is what I'm trying to illustrate to you. Okay, if I move on to the next question, and now I'm going to ask you this one here. Move on to the next question. And I'm going to ask a few people to unmute themselves. Just do it randomly, or Ocha can call on a few people if she wants to. The question is, which option below best shows good use of transitions? So in terms of language, what am I practicing here? Am I practicing at the word level, at the sentence level, or at the text level? What do you think? You can write in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself, either one. And Ocha, if you don't mind helping us make some answers public.
Okay, we have answers in the chat box.
Great.
They say sentence level.
That's correct. Okay,
yeah.
We're practicing at the sentence level. So my previous practice was focused on the vocabulary level. Now I'm focused on the sentence level. In terms of my cognitive abilities here, what am I practicing? Am I working at is this about recalling information? Is this about applying information, or is this about evaluating information? What do you think?
Oh, we have Mr. Wahyo says apply, and then Mr. Kisno says analysis.
Analysis, right?
So Miss Laura, analysis or evaluation.
The most important thing here is that we agree on this is not just about remembering information, right? Because if you're just asking your students to remember transition words, you're not really practicing them. They're not applying them. Okay, you can make a point for apply, and you can make a point for analysis too, because there's some degree of analysis, right? But when I practice writing, and this is just a personal a personal standpoint here that I come from, I consider the analysis type of questions more the ones where the students have to combine something and produce something else. Then they're really analyzing. But there is some level of analysis in this question, I agree also, but I still think it's mostly focusing on applying knowledge, applying their knowledge, okay? But if anybody said analysis, you're also correct. There is some degree of analysis. What about this one here? Combine the sentences below to reduce unnecessary repetition. The sun woke me up. The sun was hot and bright. I decided to go swimming that day. So at the language level, am I focusing on vocabulary, sentences, or text?
Mr. Wahyo says text. And also the other participants keep writing text.
Okay. Anybody else?
And from Mr. Nana, cause and effect.
Cause and effect. Okay. So that's the idea, right, behind. We're going to get to the idea in the next section, but thanks for pointing that out. Okay. To be honest with you, like we're still practicing at the sentence level, because when we get to the text level, I would probably say that 3 sentences don't really make a paragraph. If you're working at the paragraph level or combining paragraphs, then you're probably working at the text level. Okay. Of course, what we're doing here at the sentence level will have an application at the text level, but we're still focusing on sentences here because we are combining sentences. Does that make sense to everyone? What about the cognitive demand here? Are my students recalling knowledge, applying knowledge, or are they analyzing?
Mr. Aryo says analyze. Ms. Dina says applying. Keep coming, apply, and also analyzing from Mr. Kisno.
Great, great. I love that we have those two opinions because first of all, we all agree that we're not just recalling information. This is, I would say, it's a mix of application and analysis. So if you said apply and analysis, you're right. I just think that this question focuses a little bit more on, because you do have to analyze the sentences before you rewrite them, right? In first you analyze the sentence and then you apply the knowledge that you know to rewrite them into something else. Okay, and based on, would anybody like to share the answer of what they wrote in the quiz to combine those sentences? Let's get a couple of answers here.
Yeah, is there anybody who wants to volunteer?
Anybody who wants to share with us how they combined?
Yeah, you can unmute yourself too.
Yeah, you can unmute or you can speak. Let me give a few more seconds. Let me get. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot in terms of combining this one, because you may be like, oh, I don't know if my sentence is right or not. But we're not focusing on what's right or wrong. We're just focusing on the practice, really, the type of practice, right?
Yeah, maybe we can invite Mr. Aryo Mukti. Maybe you can share with us. You can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So how would you combine the sentences? Or one of the ways. There's many ways of combining. How did you combine it before?
So first of all, I analyze the sentence and I eliminate the same word, and I choose the junction word, maybe like because, and I deleted some words like decided. So the sentence that I write at the quizzes is the sun woke me up. It was hot and bright, so I go swimming that day.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So I like that you use so. And I like the fact that you also mentioned because we could have also rewritten this sentence using because, right?
Yeah.
Right. So anybody else had another answer to the question that you would like to share?
Yeah, we have from, let's see. We actually have so many answers here.
Okay, that's
so
great.
From Miss Hilda, what about Miss Hilda? Hello, Miss Hilda Sylvia.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
My answer is the sun woke me up because it was hot and bright, so I decided to go swimming that day. It's also similar with the previous speaker. I'm using cause and effect.
Mm-hmm. I see. So you use cause and effect because, right? So remember,
Yes,
great. So
yes.
cause and effect. You can focus on the idea of consequence here. Like, what's the consequence of the day being hot and bright, right? You decided to go swimming. Good job. Very good. Anybody else? Let's get one more to see if we have another possibility here for the sentence.
Maybe we can find. We can invite Miss Astiti. Hello, Miss Astiti Widyaningsi.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, this is
Hello.
from me. The hot and bright sun woke me up, so I decided to go swimming today.
Okay.
So I combined the adjectives here to describe the sun, and then I use so as the result because the sun was hot.
Yeah, and great. I like that it was different from the other examples, and it also showed us that you not only did you use the transition word, but you also synthesized the sentence a little bit, right? To reduce the repetition and to make it more synthetic. So good. So what do I want to emphasize here? And this is something you should emphasize with your students. When it comes to writing, there's multiple possibilities, right? Of course, sometimes in a multiple choice question, I can emphasize one possibility or another, right? But it's always good to include sentences that the students need to combine, because always emphasize that there are multiple possibilities. This is the best thing we can do as teachers, right? And remember, if you need to remember anything from this workshop, remember the progression, okay? If this sentence number 4 was given before question number 1, it would have been a lot more difficult for the students to engage with the content, because I'm asking them to work at the sentence level and analyze the information, when before I could have worked at the word level or at the sentence level by just recalling and applying information, and helping them build up their experience with using transition words. That's the important thing here. Work progressively. Okay, don't just give them simple questions. Go from simple to complex in terms of language, in terms of cognitive abilities. Is that okay? Is that clear to everybody? All right. So you can show your thumbs up or anything else that you would like to share. Yeah, to show.
You can use the
And
reactions, yeah?
the reactions, yeah. And Ocha, my slides got stuck again. My mouse, oh, I got it. Okay. So let's see here. Okay, you can use the thumbs up. Is the idea clear what I'm trying to emphasize here in terms of this cognitive progression or this language progression? Okay. Any questions about this so far? Are we good? You can show in the chat box your thumbs up or on the screen. All right, so I don't see any questions. We're moving on. So let's get to the second step then, okay? Well, our comprehension check was our discussion that we just did. So let's do identify and connect ideas. How do I teach this to my students? So basically, if I'm going to do a presentation, this is an example of what I could do. The volcano erupted. We could not see it. We heard it. Again, I can identify, there's probably an idea of contrast that I can include or insert in between those two sentences. And I could also insert something about contrast here, right? Because if you say, if the volcano erupted, we could not see it, but we could not see it, okay? The volcano erupted, but we heard it, okay? Or we could not see it, but we heard it. There's possibilities there. So using just compound sentences, how could this look like? The volcano erupted, but we could not see it. We heard it. Okay? The volcano erupted, we could not see it, but we heard it. Okay? Again, at the very basic level, right? Just using compound sentences here. Okay? Another possibility, consider the sentence. We opened the envelope, we took out the letter, we read it. Okay? Again, there's time or sequence of events here. Again, an idea of time and sequence of events. First, we open the envelope, and then, okay? So first we opened the envelope, then we took out the letter, finally we read it, okay? So what am I trying to point out? Sometimes it's by looking at the gaps between each of the sentences that you're going to find, okay, what idea is connecting these sentences here? What's the purpose of this second sentence? What does it add to the first sentence? And what does the third sentence add to the second and to the first sentence? So this is what I'm talking about when I'm focusing on ideas, okay? And those are the things that we need to highlight to our students, okay? So now I'm not so much focusing on why to use transitions. I'm focusing on which transitions or which transition words I need to use because of the idea that I want to highlight in the sentence. Okay. So having said that, let's do another practice so we can see how we can write questions that focus on this. So I'm going to show you. This time you're only gonna have, I think, 4 questions again. Okay. There's 4 questions, and those questions are focused or will focus on the ideas connecting the sentences. So let's have you log in again, and Ocha will share the link in the chat box, please.
Yeah, already on the chat box, yeah, Bapak Ibu?
Yeah. And once I see at least 30 people, I will start, and then the other ones can join in after that. Okay. Well, that's a very tech-savvy group. We're not, everybody keeps on popping up very quickly. That's great. Okay, we've reached the number of 30, so keep on logging in, those of you who have not yet, and I'm going to start the quiz so that we can move forward. Okay, I'm taking off the sound. I don't know if you're listening to it here, but not through the slides, just to make sure that you can focus on the question a little bit more. Okay, you're going to see that some are multiple choice also, and some involve completing sentences and paragraphs. I'm going to give you, I think you have a total of about 2 minutes to finish this, and that's the time I'm going to give you. But if I see that most people finish before, I'm going to switch back to the slides so we can start focusing on the questions themselves. It's a very quick, very reactive group. I'm so happy about that. So the first question here, we'll focus on, our focus is on identifying an idea, right? The idea of when. The second one, you have to pick a transition word that expresses time, or the best one, because all of them are expressing time. So what's the best one in this case? And number 3, it's a fill in the blank, but you have to type what it is that you want to fill in. And the fourth question, you have to pick a set of transition words that make sense here. All right. Okay. So we have, I think we have more than 40 people have already answered the question. So I'm going to transition back to the slides so that we can I'm going to leave the quiz on for a few more minutes, and then I'm going to go back to it, because we can actually start talking about the quiz from the slides so that we don't stay there too much. Okay, so which idea does when express in when it rains, make sure to close the windows? Okay, of course, this is the idea of time, right? Because that's the purpose of using when in this sentence, because we want to emphasize that this happens when it rains, right? This should happen when it rains. And let me hear from you again. Let's talk about this question. Then we go back to quizzes to see if how everybody did. But in terms of language, what level am I working on here? Am I working on the word level, vocabulary level, sentence level, or text level? What do you think? You can type in the chat box. Let's see what people say.
Yeah, from Mr. Kismo, it's vocabulary. And then the other participants say word types.
Yeah, word level, right? When I say vocabulary, it can be word level too.
Okay.
Because it's great. Yeah, sorry I didn't make that clear before, but thank you, Ocha, for pointing that out. And so the question type is focusing on the word level or vocabulary level. So the answer is just a word, right? And what about the cognitive abilities here? Are they recalling? Are they applying? Are they analyzing? What do you think?
Mr. Ahmed Taufik says recall. And also from Miss Sri Pujiastuti, it's applying. And also someone says analyzing.
So, and before I give you the answer, just because I'm emphasizing one doesn't mean the others don't apply, okay? I'm going to talk about that in this case. In this case, I am analyzing information, okay? But because I do have to analyze the sentence to get the idea. But of course, before I get to analyze, I still have to remember which transition words refer to time. I still have to recall that information, and I still have to be able to apply it. So analyzing actually involves the ability to recall and involves the ability to apply information, because they're progressive, right? These levels are progressive. Of course, recall doesn't involve application and analysis, but analysis does involve both. So it doesn't mean that there's no recall here. It doesn't mean that there's no application. But the focus here is really on analyzing information. That's what I want to emphasize. Because students do have to read the sentence, and they do have to understand and analyze the sentence to make sure that they can identify the idea or the purpose. Is that okay? Right? So let's just quickly here, I didn't stop the quiz there. So let me show you what the results were. Okay, I'm not focusing on how many are correct or how many are not, but when we talk about the questions, then you can see if you got it right or if you didn't, right? This is not the point here. The point is for us to really understand how to create those questions and how to make them, okay? This is good, and you probably got the answer yourself when you were doing the question. I'm trying to end here, but I can't for some reason. There you go. There's the result. Okay, and
wow, congratulations, Miss Alfiasari.
Yeah, we have quite, again, we're just doing this for fun, right? The most important thing here is that we understand how we are practicing transitions. But good job for those of you. If you are the competitive type of participant, this is great. Okay, so going back to the slide, let me just leave this ready for us to go to the next one later. Going back to the slides here, let's look at some other question types. Okay, let's get to the next one. Which transition word expressing time best completes the following sentence? So the answer is before, right? It's highlighted here. In terms of language, what am I practicing? At what level am I practicing? Let's see some.
Mr. Taufik says sentence, and also from Mr. Deki Cristiano, sentence, and Miss Dina says word level. And then we still have another participant says sentence, and also someone says word.
Yeah, so
between those two.
So they are picking a word, but they are having to complete a sentence. So that's the reason here why I put sentence here. They're working at the sentence lab because they're completing a sentence in a way that makes sense. So if they don't have a clear understanding of the whole sentence, it's going to be hard for them to complete. Okay, if I was asking a question of the type, okay, which of the transition words below express the idea of time, then I would say, okay, this is a practice at the word level. But because they're using the transition word to complete the sentence, then I'm actually practicing at the sentence level here. Okay, just so that everybody understands. But it's good. I like that we have diverging answers, because this is important for us to illustrate what actually means to be working at the sentence level and word level, etc. What about the cognitive ability? Am I recalling, applying, analyzing? What am I doing here? Let's see what we have.
Mr. Krishna says recalling and analyzing, and the other participants says analyzing, most of them.
So let's remember that the higher levels of thinking, they tend to include the formal ones, right? So that's important for us to remember. I do think that there is, you do have to analyze the sentence, but for the most part here, it's a matter of recall and apply, right? I think that I would say for writing, most of the fill in the blank sentences are probably related to applying knowledge. Some of them may require some degree of analysis, but at a very low level, not at a high level. If I'm filling in the blanks, for the most part, especially if it's only one word, I would say that I'm applying knowledge. That's basically what I would say here. But you could make a case for apply, analyze. You could make a case for that, right? Depending on how you structure the sentence. What about this one here? Okay, those are some of the possible answers, right? Consider the idea between the two sentences and choose the transition word that best connects them. We studied a lot. So again, two of the answers here, because of the punctuation, because of the structure of the sentence, right? The answer is here, two of the possible answers, two of many, could be however and nevertheless. If you have any other suggestions, just write them in the chat box and we can discuss them as well, okay? But again, the most important thing for us, more than the answer itself, at what level am I practicing language here?
Yeah, Miss Sri says sentence level, And Mr. Taufik says the same. And also from Miss Wiwi, Miss Esther, sentence. They say sentence level.
Okay. Thank you for those of you who are promptly joining and participating. Don't be shy. Thank you so much. So yes, we are practicing at the sentence level, right? Because we're completing a sentence, right? And what about the cognitive demand here, or the cognitive focus? Is it on recalling, applying, or analyzing? Or even evaluating, right? Could be.
Miss Winaria says analyzing. From Miss Hilya, recalling. Mr. Kisno says analyzing or evaluating.
So
another analyzing, recalling.
Yes, I would probably agree with those of you who said apply, analyze. Of course, if I'm applying and analyzing, there's a certain degree of recall. But the reason why I picked apply or analyze here is because the students are not just remembering which one is correct. They have to remember the possibilities, and they have to analyze if the possibilities really work, right? Or if those possibilities really work. So it does require some degree of analysis, okay? That's the reason why I put it that way. And what about this one here? Okay, the best answer is the one in green, right? Consider the flow of ideas in the text and choose the set that best completes it. Okay, after I got to the office, I saw that my papers were spread all over the table and some were even on the floor. I thought about calling security, but instead I decided to take a look around and see if there were any clues. Then I picked up the phone and called my boss. So if you look at the whole meaning here, this is what matters the most. But again, if you got it right or wrong, it's just a detail for what we're doing now. What about the language level? What level are we practicing?
Yeah, most of the participants says text level.
And what about the cognitive level here, or demand level?
And also, there are some answers. Some participants says it's paragraph level. Meanwhile, the cognitive is from Mr. Robert, it's evaluating. And from Mr. Kisno, it's analyzing and evaluating.
So text and analyze, right? Okay, if you said paragraph, you're right also, okay? You're right, because when you talk about paragraphs, you're talking about text, right? And it's more than sentence. So consider your answer correct if you said paragraph, so text and paragraph is okay. And yes, we're definitely analyzing information here because, so again, the point that I want to make, okay? Practice progressively, okay? So that you can help your students. Writing is difficult enough for the student to make sense and connect ideas and apply that knowledge. So give them time to first remember the information and then to apply the information and then to analyze information and even later on create. You can work at the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I'm just emphasizing on those 3 levels so that you can see a progression. Okay? Later on, you can just say, hey, write a sentence about what you did today using a transition word expressing expressing time. They're creating a sentence. So you can even go to higher levels than analyzing. There's all those possibilities, but the important thing is to do it progressively. So let's go to, do we have any questions so far? Would anybody like to ask a question or make a comment before we go to step number 3? Let me open a window here so that we have a chance to clarify anything. Is what we're covering here clear? Does this make sense to all of you? Would anybody like to ask a question related to it or type a question?
And also the participants, you can unmute yourself too.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself or you can type a question.
That's true.
Mr. Fabio, can I ask you?
Of course.
Wait, I just a little question before a context level with applying and analyzing, because when I say that, oh, this is analyzing question, but at the same time, it's applying to. Could you explain more that how to differentiate between the context level between analyzing question or applying question?
That's a great question, Ilda. And here's what I do. To me, it's very hard to, actually not very hard. On very few occasions, am I able to say, okay, this is just one cognitive ability. Okay? Of course, like some types of questions, like recall questions, are very easy to identify because you're just remembering information, right? The best example of a recall question in English, and I'm not using transition words here, okay? Actually, I could be using transition words. If I give the student a little table and I say, complete this table using any 3 transition words you can remember, that will be a recall question, right? Because my question is focusing on what they can remember, anything they can remember about the topic, right? Now, if I'm asking the student to use what they remember to solve a problem, then they are applying knowledge. So again, if I'm using what I remember to solve a problem, I'm applying knowledge. Now, if I have if I ask my student to analyze information, and usually it's complex information, and then use what they know to solve a problem, then my focus is on analyzing. Now, what I'm also saying is that some questions, the questions that involve analyzing information, okay, there's of course, if you are analyzing information, it's because later on you're going to be applying knowledge. So there's a certain degree of applying there. When I say that one question focuses on applying, one question focuses on recalling, what I'm saying is this is the strongest cognitive ability that's been used here. Okay, so or the reason why I put that question together. I put that question together because I wanted them to analyze information and then pick an answer. Or I put that question together because I wanted them to just apply what they know. Or I put that question together because I just wanted them to remember what they know. So think about it as your reason for creating the question. Is that clear now? Okay. But you are right. Sometimes it is confusing because there's always some degree of overlap. If you go to the higher levels of thinking, they will probably include the lower levels of thinking also. Okay? Do we have any other questions, or do we continue?
Yeah, it's actually, the question is quite the same. We have on the chat box from Ms. Winaria. It's about when the students use the ability of analyzing, do they also apply the knowledge at the same time? Yeah, that's quite the same, right?
Yeah, very good. But a very good way to put this question, because I think it completes Ilda's question. When you are applying, you're not always analyzing. But every time you're analyzing, you are applying.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you go higher in the cognitive scale, you are using some of the abilities that are behind. But if you are behind, you're not necessarily using the ones ahead. Okay? So if you're recalling, you're not applying. But if you're applying, you are to some degree recalling also. Okay? Those are very good questions, and thank you for asking them, because it just helps to make it clear for everybody else. Okay?
Yeah.
So we're going to go to the last step that I want to emphasize in the teaching of transition words here, which is going from simple to complex writing, right? This is a very important thing to teach your students when you teach writing, because if they're taking tests in the future, any type of English test, their ability to produce complex sentences will determine their score, will determine their grades. And also, it just makes them better writers, okay? And so now when we're talking about from simple to complex writing, we're focusing on, okay, how can I rewrite a sentence with and using in addition, or in addition to, or besides, furthermore, moreover? How can I rewrite a sentence that has but, with, although, nevertheless, despite, or in contrast, etc.? How can I rewrite a sentence that has so, with, therefore, as a result, since, and because? Students, this helps them realize two things. This helps them realize that there is a connection between simple and complex sentences. Sometimes a complex sentence is a different way to rewrite or to paraphrase a simple sentence, helping the reader make sense of your ideas, right? If I say, although, nevertheless, I am highlighting a contrast. If I say, besides, moreover, I am highlighting the idea of ideas being connected, or one idea adding to the other. If I'm using therefore, as a result, I'm highlighting the fact that there is a cause and effect connection here. And I'm making it much clearer than so makes it clear. Okay, so this is what I'm doing, first of all. Second, I'm also calling my students' attention to the fact that there's multiple possibilities in language. There's multiple possibilities, and this is important, right? Because there's never just one correct answer. So how can I illustrate this? So for example, if you look at the compound sentence, Ari purchased a new shirt and he also bought a new pair of shoes. So if I make this a complex sentence, I can say, in addition to purchasing a new shirt, Ari bought a new pair of shoes. So let me ask you here, in terms of the sentence structure, you know, the way that I put the sentence together, grammatically speaking, or structurally speaking, what is different? What is different if I compare the complex sentence to the compound sentence? What changed? Any volunteers? Or Ocha, if you want to call on someone, please.
Yeah, we have an answer from Mr. Taufik. The complex used dependent and independent clause.
Exactly. And very good, Taufik, very good observation. Why is this important? Because if I am using a dependent and an independent clause, and again, the independent clause is Ari bought a new pair of shoes, and the dependent clause is the subordinate clause, right? In addition to purchasing a new shirt. When we do that when I do that to my readers, I'm putting the ideas in a hierarchy to them. This is the most important idea. This is the less important idea. Or it also allows me to move ideas around. Okay, so for example, there's two sentences here. One is purchasing a new shirt. The other one is bought a new pair of shoes. When I write the complex sentence, okay, I bring more focus to the fact that Ari bought a new pair of shoes. In addition to purchasing a new shirt, he bought a new pair of shoes, right? Or depending on what comes before, I could be bringing additional focus to the fact that he also bought a new shirt. Okay, so there's a hierarchy in the second one, in the complex sentence, but there isn't a hierarchy in the compound sentence, because in the compound sentence, both sentences are the same. One is not independent. One is not dependent. Both are independent, okay? So let's see another example. Ari worked hard to buy a new shirt, but that's the idea here, contrast. He ended up changing his mind and not buying it. So, complex sentence, Ari ended up changing his mind and not buying a new shirt, even though he worked hard for it. So again, what is different in terms of structure in my complex sentence? What changed? Volunteers?
Anyone who wants to speak up?
You can unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat box.
Hi, sir. I would like to answer.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the first sentence, the compound sentence, focused on the process of thinking of buying things or not. However, in the complex sentence, it focuses on the result.
There you go. So there is a you are highlighting an important element in what Ari did. Okay, so there is a stronger focus. Okay, whereas the first one is just about, okay, this happened, but that also happened. It's just basically you're basically narrating a fact without too much attention to what information is more important and what information is less important. There you go. Thank you so much for contributing. Any other contributions? All right.
We have answers on the chat box, actually.
Do you have answers?
It says the emphasis of the sentence. And also the switch of the position.
Thank you for saying that. I almost forgot to say that. Thank you for whoever said switching position. And this is very important in writing, because depending on the idea that comes before the sentence and comes after the sentence, by switching the order of the ideas, I can make connections between my ideas more easily. This is a very good point, okay? Especially if you're teaching academic writing at higher levels, this is something you do want to emphasize. And complex structures allow me to reposition ideas in the sentence. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about the fact that in my first sentence, the compound one, buying a new shirt came first, and changing his mind and not buying it came second. But the complex sentence allowed me to switch that around, okay? And to put the first idea last and the last idea first. And this is very, very important in terms of connecting my writing as a paragraph, okay? So let's do our last practice today. This is only 2 questions, I think. It's a little shorter, okay? But those are different types of questions. So I just wanted to do a practice of how you can bring that up in your class by putting questions together for your students. So let's see here. All right, good luck. Okay, so this is your code. And Ocha, if you could please put that in the chat box, that'll be great.
Yeah, already.
Oh, you're faster than I am. Okay, so I'm gonna wait until we get to a certain number of people and then I'll start the quiz. Okay. Wow, what a quick group. Okay. There you go, 30 people. All right, we're starting the quiz. If you haven't logged on yet, keep on trying to do it and you can catch up with us. Okay. But I'm starting. All right, I'm taking off the music. Okay, so here we have 2 questions. Only one is multiple choice and the other one involves rewriting. So just do your best. Again, this is not a competition. Okay. And I'm looking at the number of people who are answering. I know I'm going to give you a little more time because the open-ended question may take a while for you to rewrite. But right after a certain number of people, I'll transition to the slides so we can start discussing it, because this is pretty much the last round, and I want to leave time for questions at the end and time for debrief and for people to bring other perspectives that we haven't brought up yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what a quick group. This is impressive.
Amazing.
Yeah, like over 30 people have already answered the first question. Yeah, 40 now, over 40 people, and then over 30 have answered. So I'm gonna stop sharing now and go to the slides, and then I'll go back to the answers, so we can look at how we did. Just it's curiosity, because we're not really competing. All right, so the first one here. Which of the transition words below is closest in meaning to but? In the pandemic has lasted almost a year, but we still have not found a cure. So what's the answer? You can write in the chat box because I forgot to highlight it in the slide. What's the answer? Remember that but indicates a contrast, right? So which other transition words here indicates contrast?
Yeah, there are some answers, although.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There you go. So if I had to rewrite this answer, the only possibility here, well, not the only, but the possibility in this case would be although, okay? And what am I practicing here at the language level? Am I focusing on the word, paragraph, I'm sorry, word, sentence, or text, or paragraph?
Mr. Taufik says sentence, and then Mr. Deki, word. And the other participants, most of them say sentence.
Okay, so sentence. Of course, we remember that the answer choices are words, right? But to some degree, the student has to consider the whole sentence before making a decision, right? They're picking a word, okay, but they're sort of like, they need to consider the whole sentence in this case, okay? I would let me correct myself. Let me correct myself. I think you can answer word here. Why? Because if I just look at but and I say which words below can be a synonym for but, I can still answer the question like that. So if you said word, you're also right. Okay, I should have included the word there. So I can answer the question by considering the whole sentence, or I can answer the question just by looking at the word but and then find a synonym for it. You're right. So I would consider the word level too. Just thinking about the question now. So just to illustrate to you that sometimes this is not as easy, and sometimes it's good to look at what you do later to see if you're on the right track. But and I wanted to illustrate this process in my mind now, so that I can see that sometimes you have to do that in your class also. What about the cognitive ability? What am I practicing here? Am I working? Am I recalling, applying, analyzing?
Yeah, some of the participants says recalling, and then there is also some says analyze. And here we also have recall or apply.
So I'm applying. Of course, applying involves recall, okay? I would say, again, correcting myself, if I just look at but and say, what is a synonym for but, then that would be a recall. But if I'm rewriting the sentence and saying, which one of these words makes sense if I rewrite this, then I'm actually applying, okay? Because I included word in language, then I have to include recall when I'm applying. So this is a word / sentence, or in recall / apply. So if you said any of this, you're right, okay? Good job. And thanks for pointing that out. Now, the second one, rewrite the sentence below, replacing the conjunction so with the transition word close in meaning. The stores closed early, so we all went home. Would anybody like to type some answers, some possible answers, or unmute your... Just briefly.
We're still waiting for them. Rewriting the sentence.
Okay. Sorry to make you write it twice, but if you can just remember your answer from the quiz.
We have an answer here from Mr. Sudianto. The stores closed early, therefore we all went home.
Therefore we went home, yeah.
Okay, and we also have here from Mr. Taufik. Since the stores closed early, we all went home.
Also correct. Any other possibilities?
Miss Evita, we all went home as the stores closed early.
Good job. Thank you guys for highlighting those many possibilities, and be open to these possibilities coming from your students too, okay, in your class. Good job. I'll stop here, and I know there's more people that want to contribute, so that we have time for questions and just a few more things before we ask questions. So what are we practicing here in terms of language? At what level are we practicing? Anybody?
Sentence level, yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the participants say sentence level.
And in terms of the cognitive demand or cognitive ability,
yeah. Miss Evita says analyze, and from Miss Diane we have apply.
Okay, apply, analyze.
Okay, that's great.
On the right track. Good job. Okay, so quickly here, because I know we all like to play games, and it would be cruel of me to not show, right, the results. So this is, have 36 people answered correct, 1 answered incorrect. Let me see if I can, how can I show the results here? I think I have to end it like I did before. Okay, and nothing is happening. So, oh, there you go. Okay, all right.
Okay, Sudi.
Right. So for those of you who are particular about winning, there you go. Your ego is happy now. There you go. Okay.
Yeah. Congratulations. Well done.
All right. So There's only one thing I want to highlight because we're almost getting to the end and I want to leave time for questions, plenty of time. Sometimes, okay, when you're going from simple to complex, make sure that you also get to the text level, because the sentences that I put together now, they mostly focus on sentences and paragraphs, mostly on sentences and words, okay? I want to show you, you don't have to log on because I'm going to show you this now, but this is going to be on the handout also. When you receive a handout, this link will be there, okay? So don't panic. I will share it with you. This is what it looks like. This is a practice. We're not going to do it now. We're just going to look at it. This is a practice that I put together, showing you how we can work at the sentence and paragraph and text level. So the first one, ask the students, write a statement, then write a statement that clarifies it. Okay, my friend eats a lot. As a result, he gains a lot of weight. So I'm focusing on the idea. Okay, I want them to write a sentence and then clarify it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fabio, you are still muted.
Okay, somebody muted me. I'm muted now. Okay, so repeating here. So I'm asking the student to clarify the first sentence or the first statement. And by to clarify, they have to use a transition word as a result. Okay, or you can say that explains it. You could say that to because, whatever. Number two, write a statement, then write another statement that adds to it. Okay, I'm focusing on the idea of addition. Example, so I give an example. Examples are important so that the student knows what you're trying to do. Something that I know Mr. Todd from Mentari suggested I do when I was showing this presentation to him is don't forget that sometimes, depending on the level you're working, using pictures may be more effective than using sentences, right? Don't forget that. You can, for example, ask the student to use transition words, or the students to use transition words to describe a process, as you are doing here, of making a sandwich, right? If I was in Indonesia, I would say probably making nasi goreng or making Indomie. Indomie would be a perfect sequence to have students write about, okay? First, you open the package and then you boil the water, exactly, right? Etc. And I can also focus on cause and effect, okay? Using transition words, write at least 2 sentences expressing the cause and effect relationships shown below. So there's 3 possible sentences here, but I'm asking them to write at least 2, okay? And again, there is a link to this practice if you want to develop other practices focused on it. And I remember in the beginning, I think it was Taufik who said that sometimes that my students don't have ideas to write. If your students are running out of ideas to write sentences, you can do what I did here in number 5. You can say, for example, write a short paragraph using the characters and sequence of events below. Make sure to add transition words in your text. So instead of asking them to create the context of the writing, of the characters, I already gave them the main ideas, and they just have to write sentences to connect them. So what am I doing here? I'm focusing more on the connections between ideas. I'm not focusing on creativity so much. Maybe following this exercise, I could add another exercise in which they would create everything from scratch, because then they would have had a model to base off of. Okay, so Kia and Regina, wake up, go to the beach, a storm begins before noon, hide from the rain, wait for 30 minutes under a tree, go home. Again, I'm supplying the language that they need so that they can focus on applying the knowledge and analyzing the information, right? But they don't have to focus on language so much. This is one example of how you can do that. So going back to the slides here, just to wrap up. Okay. Well, any questions or any comments on what I just showed in the Google form? If not, there's only 3 more slides, and then we go to questions, and then you can ask questions at the end.
Maybe we can continue, Mr. Fabio.
Continue, and then we do questions at the end,
yeah,
right?
That's right.
One thing I want to highlight, and this is also, if you're writing paragraphs, if you're writing texts, remember, you can always share documents on Google Drive, and before you look at student writing, students can be invited to comment on each other's writing. Okay, never forget to do that. Okay, even if you're asking them to write a little paragraph, write a sentence, you can always use Google Docs to get students to comment on each other's writing. And if you're looking for a tool that can be free for you to practice writing with your class, you can always use Write and Improve. Let me give you a secret here that Todd also reminded me of, and it's important for you to know. When you log on to Write and Improve, you can log on as a teacher or as a student. But if you log on as a student, your free access will be wider, and you can actually get feedback, or you can see the feedback that you get on your writing. Okay, and you can do that for free. And if you log on as a teacher, at some point they're going to start charging you for what you do. So you can log on as a student, and you can practice not only transitions, but writing in general. It's just a tool for you to use if you haven't heard of it yet, okay? And remember, when you are assessing writing, I'm not gonna go too much into this, but you can have them type in class. Oh, sorry. You can have them type in class. You can have them do timed activities. They can exchange drafts or look at each other's Google documents. And you can do this online or in class. But you can also write at home. I would probably suggest that if you're writing big texts, that you do that as home assignments, that you don't do that during a session, because it will take too much of your session. But you can write sentences in paragraphs during an online session, right? Or you can do just a mix of this. Okay? There's multiple ways that you can use to assess. But you can use peer feedback, again, sentence or paragraph level writing online, and then writing texts asynchronously online or at home. And remember this, okay? Remember that depending on what you teach, the transitions that you're going to focus on, if you're going to focus more on cause and effect, or if you're going to focus more on time. Okay, if I'm teaching a narrative text, then I'm probably going to need to focus my lesson on time and sequence transitions. But if I'm a science teacher and I'm teaching a scientific process, I may need to focus a little bit more on cause and effect. Okay, so what you're going to teach depends a lot on the genre, on the text that you're teaching. Okay, and it's not a good idea to teach all those transitions at once. We will be confusing students. Okay, teach time and sequence, and then next lesson teach cause and effect, and move on throughout different transition words. Okay, the last slide to wrap up. Teach transitions at the word, sentence, and text levels. Practice different language and cognitive demands, and make sure to include full texts. Okay, because that's the ultimate goal of writing, right? Especially if you're writing for school. So let's open for questions and answers.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fabio. And your participants, if you have any question or you want to deliver your ideas to Mr. Fabio, you can type it on the chat box, or you can use the raise hand feature. Silakan Bapak Ibu, apabila ada pertanyaan untuk Mr. Fabio. Okay, we have Miss Hilda. Hello, Miss Hilda.
Hello, Mr. Fabio. I want to ask you about the punctuation. Hello?
Hello? I'm listening. Punctuation.
Mr. Fabio, I want to ask you about the punctuation, because most of the transition words use punctuation like a comma. So when should we teach them, the students, I mean, at the same time when we teach them about the transition words, how to use them and blah, 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 or we should separate the words. We should separate the punctuation and learnings, how to say it, like the words.
So
like
first
the
of all,
words
thank
of
you.
transition. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. I love that you brought this up because it is important, and your question is quite relevant too. It depends on your focus. My suggestion too is don't focus on everything at once. If you're teaching them step one, okay, why to use transition words, then your focus is not going to be punctuation. But if you're teaching them how to rewrite a sentence with and, using in addition to, or using moreover, then at some point you're going to have to focus on punctuation. But in writing in general, I would give you this general advice. Focus on ideas and logic first, and then focus on the mechanics of writing. Okay? You have to teach it. Don't ignore the mechanics. Don't ignore the grammar. Don't ignore the punctuation. But if you, in general, punctuation mechanics should come last. Unless you have taught ideas, you have taught transitions, you have taught everything. And then you tell your students, now we're going to do a class about punctuation. Okay, then punctuation will be your focus. That's fine. But if you're talking about the writing process in general, punctuation comes more at the end, because it doesn't make sense to punctuate, to add punctuation to a sentence that doesn't make sense at all, right? That's the point. Okay, but thank you for your question. Very good.
Okay, thank you, Miss Hilda. And also from Miss Dina, yeah, actually the question is the same. It's about the punctuations. And we can invite here Mr. Ronnie Tandeo. Hello, Mr. Ronnie.
Hello, Miss Ocha.
Hello.
Hello, Mr.
Hello again.
Yeah, hello again. So, thank you very much for your share, Mr. Coelho. It's very informative, and frankly speaking, it teaches me a lot. I learn a lot from your session. But maybe if you don't mind, I would like to ask you, if you don't mind, I would like to go further a bit. Just now you shared about connecting sentences, about connecting two sentences into one. Now, I would like to go further about connecting paragraphs, because sometimes when we teach writing, it's not only about writing one single sentence or one single paragraph. Sometimes we have to ask the students to write 3 or 4 paragraphs. So my question is, how can you connect the ideas between paragraphs in one text or in one sort of writing task like that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And thank you for pointing that out, okay? Because as I said in the beginning, I was going to focus today at the sentence and the paragraph level, and then give you some ideas of how to practice at the text level. Ultimately, I completely agree with you. We need to get our students to write full texts. At the paragraph level, there's 2 things you need to think about. Not only transitions do play a role, right? Do play a role. For example, in the topic sentence of a paragraph, the topic sentence may be bringing information from a previous paragraph. So transition may be a key there. But it's not just transitions that are important when you're writing paragraphs. Sometimes the last sentence that you add to a paragraph and the first sentence that you put in the next paragraph can establish a connection between themselves, right, in this case. And if you want to focus on connecting paragraphs, go back to your pre-writing, okay? When your students are doing pre-writing, and they're saying, and they're determining what's the topic of the first paragraph, what's the topic of the second paragraph, what's the topic of the third paragraph. The progression of these topics needs to be logical. And then, because no matter what you do, transitions cannot fix a problem of logic if it's not fixed at the root, right? So when the student is planning a paragraph, okay, what are you going to write about first? What makes sense to write about next in the next paragraph? And what makes sense to write about after that? If that logic is not established, transition words cannot do any magic, okay, or work any magic there. But it's a combination of using transitions, using ideas, okay? But you're right. If I had to add another practice to this one, another workshop to this one, I would say, okay, how do you move from the sentence and the level and to the text and the genre level, okay? Because ultimately, that's what we want to do. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we also have a question here from Miss Winaria Peggy. Hello, Miss Peggy.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Kolo.
Hello.
Is it correct way to say your name?
You said
I'm
it
sorry
perfectly.
if I make mistake.
You said it great.
Yeah. Okay. So just now I wrote some of your presentation. Actually, here you talk about genre, right? And then after defining a genre of the writing, we go to the text, right? We know that there are many kinds of text, start from argumentative writing, narrative writing, report, personal narrative is also different. Sometimes I always find out myself being confused to start from which part. Do I need to start from the introduction of the text itself, the features, the structures, or do I need to start with the, the words, the connectors that you that you taught us today, or do I need to explain to them the aim of the text first? Because sometimes teaching writing is well, actually, it's a hard work, right? Especially when we talk about the kind of text itself. Argumentative will use different connectors. However, narrative also will use different connectors. And sometimes I find out that my students do not even understand where to start and how to start. Yeah, and it's being complicated after all. So would you please explain? Maybe you can help us with this problem. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very good. I think what you said is really key here also. And all of you guys, thank you for your questions because they're spot on. They're really good. There's the approach that I take to writing when I'm teaching writing is actually called a genre-based approach to teaching writing. If any of you guys are not familiar with it, the University of Sydney, there's many scholars from all over the world that have been working at the University of Sydney in Australia, and they've developed an approach to writing that is called the genre-based approach. If you Google it, you will find it. And you can find materials to teach writing from basic levels, elementary school, all the way to university. I find it the most appropriate way to teach writing. How do you approach writing from this? Okay, and basically, if you look at my table, genre, text, word level, this is taken from a genre-based approach to teaching writing. What do they say? Every time you teach in writing, just because you teach a transition in addition to, or let's say moreover, it doesn't mean that is applied equally in all types of texts. No, if you're teaching in a narrative text, or a lab report, or a persuasive essay, those transitions will work differently in the way that they connect ideas. You're right. So what I do when I'm teaching writing is, if I'm writing a different type of text, the first thing I do is I select 3 samples of that text to my students at their level, and I give it to them, because you can't ask your students to produce something that they have never seen before. Okay? I taught a class in Indonesia at UNES, where I was teaching my students to write research proposals. The first thing I did is I printed 3 research proposals for each student, gave them, and said, look at these proposals. What do you see in it? How many sections are there? What are the sections called? What are they about? What are the writers doing? Make your students familiar with the type of text they have to produce. The next thing you do after the students understand what they're going to have to produce, then break it apart. Okay, how many parts are there? Which parts are there? What's in the first part? What's in the second part? Let me give an example. If you're teaching your students to write a description, print a few descriptions, give them 3 samples of good descriptions, have them analyze it. What did the writers do in their first paragraph? What do you find in common in the first paragraph of each description? What do you find in common in the second paragraph, in the third paragraph? Have them understand and dissect the text, and then move on to how to write the first paragraph, how to write the second paragraph, how to write the third paragraph, and then go to sentences, transitions, and all that. So make sure that the students understand what they're writing at every level, but don't have your students write something that they've never seen before, because it's very difficult, right? Imagine someone asking you to drive a car if they never show you what a car looks like, right? It's very difficult, right? Imagine people asking you to ride a motorbike if they never show you what a motorbike looks like. It's impossible. So make them really comfortable with what they're writing before they write it. And you can do that at the text level, at the paragraph level, and at the sentence level, okay? If you're teaching them how to tweet, how to use Twitter, show them good examples of tweets, right? If you want them to write good emails, show them good examples of emails. Have them break them apart. And this is a topic for a whole new workshop, genre-based approach to writing, okay? But if you Google, you will find many good materials, okay? I'm gonna write the name in the chat box for you guys. All right, so I hope I answered your question, and back to you, Ocha.
Yeah, okay, so there is this question from Miss Wiwi. She asked about, is it okay to use and in the beginning of a sentence? What do you think, Mr. Fabio?
So I would say the short answer is yes. The more complex answer is it depends on who you're writing for.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm writing a research paper, and I start a sentence with and, depending on the journal, they may not accept it. They may ask me to revise it. Okay. Or if I'm writing a legal document or something. Now, if you go today, for example, if you go to the best publications around the world, for example, the New York Times or the Guardian, and you look at the editorials, some of their best writers, they do start sentences with and. Remember, when you tell your students about writing rules, don't be too categorical about them. The rules vary depending on where you're writing and who you're writing for. I start a lot of sentences with and, okay? When I'm texting, when I'm writing emails, when I'm writing sometimes persuasive texts. Now, if I'm writing for a scholarship, if I'm writing for a very competitive program where someone may be a little bit conservative and they may not like people to start sentences with and, then I don't write my sentences with and, okay? So modulate your writing. Is it wrong? No, it's not wrong, but it depends on who you're writing for and when you're writing, okay? People who give you categorical statements about writing, they're probably risking making mistakes, because there's always something that is possible depending on who you're writing for and where you're writing, okay? Mistakes are okay when you're writing a WhatsApp message, but they're not okay when you are writing a competitive essay or when you want to score points, okay? If you're writing an IELTS essay, the number of grammar mistakes may reduce your score, so avoid them, right? So it depends on the context, okay? But if you ask me, is it wrong? I would say no, it isn't.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fabio. So I think that would be the end of the Q&A sessions because it's almost time. So, but don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, if you still have any questions or you want to deliver your idea to our speaker, you can deliver it through our email address or WhatsApp number on the screen. Silakan dapat dicatat terlebih dahulu. And I would like to say thank you very much to Mr. Fabio for a wonderful and informative sessions about academic writing using transitions. And from Mr. Fabio's explanation, we received so many teaching ideas and also strategies to be applied in our virtual learning. So thank you very much again, Mr. Fabio.